Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where my dad, Coach Alex Van Houten, posts his 14 years of experience to work for you. You should listen to him. Here's Pretty Beast Mode. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. Here, we're working to become 1% better every single day, improving ourselves as individuals, and therefore setting a great example for our communities and rubbing off on them in a positive and beneficial way. You're listening to Season 3, Episode 4 of Defining Dad Bod, where we're going to dive in to probiotics. We're in the middle of our supplement series here in Season 3, where we're taking our listeners' questions and diving into the research and the coaching practices of healthy and powerful supplement use. You can review our past episodes on different topics and ask your questions at definingdadbod.com/subs, SUPPS. Now, as I do with any of our supplement episodes, a medical disclaimer here. While this information is supported by research and the citations are included in the show notes below, none of what you hear today is to be considered medical advice. We are not diagnosing, treating, or curing symptoms related to medical disease. And therefore, if you need some advice on those topics, I have to recommend you talking to your doctor first. Now, two things before we dive into probiotics. First, some food for thought. Our oldest, Gabriel, turned 5 this week, and it feels like an especially pivotal time in his life, at least to his dad. I mean, the kid's going to be starting kindergarten soon. He's doing things like riding a big boy bike with no training wheels, protecting his younger brother from anthills, and starting discussions with the phrase, "You know, I've been thinking." We even recently started playing Minecraft together, which if you haven't played it, it's kind of like virtual Legos. Maybe I'll talk some more about that in the future, but he earns that time in our house by reading 2 books and practice writing a sentence 5 times every day. He really has grown up fast. But on his 5th birthday, I wanted to mark the occasion where he got to stop taking naps every day and call himself a big boy before starting school by encouraging him to burn his childhood blanket. I've read a lot about masculinity, and in my own journey to manhood, I've often been fascinated with the idea of rituals that signify a rite of passage, that are memorable enough to tell a man, or in my son's case, a boy, that he's made a significant transition. Recently, I was reading about how in females, that seems to be biologically and internally driven by their own bodies. Things like coming of age as a woman, or becoming a mother, are mostly internal changes that are driven by her own biological system. Men, on the other hand, don't have such mile markers in their lives. And so in many cultures, the transition from young boyhood to big boyhood, or boyhood to adolescence, or adolescence to manhood, are often indicated by an external event. And in some communities, these practices are passed on from generation to generation for hundreds, even thousands of years. So in my dad brain, I've been working with Gabriel to help him understand the sacrifice of hard work, and how as a developing man, he's going to be asked to give up some things in his life in order to make things better for himself, his family, his community in the future. And so, to commemorate this transition from little boy Gabriel to big boy Gabriel, I asked him if he was willing to give up the comfort of his toddlerhood. He's been carrying around this ratty blanket since as long as I can remember. While we're not the kind of parents who let him take it to Walmart, we also saw that it was important to him, and so he's been sleeping with it for at least 4 years. I thought he'd have a hard time with it, but when the day came and the fire started, he didn't have a problem throwing his blanket on the coals. We watched it burn. We remarked on how the smoke seemed to be going up to heaven, so maybe God would hold his blanket for him. And then we roasted marshmallows on the fire. In our modern era, we don't have a lot of rituals anymore. And while I'm doing my best as a dad, I realize we only get one shot at this thing. So I'm curious what you think about rituals. How have you helped to transition your children from young childhood to boyhood or girlhood, or perhaps adolescence to young manhood or womanhood? I'd love to know how you are working to make these transitions memorable for them, and whether or not you think they worked out well. As for me in my house, Bennett, our youngest, is starting to enjoy cuddling his blanket at nap time, and I think I'll be doing the blanket burning ritual with him when he turns 5 as well. And there's some food for thought for the week. Thanks for munching on that with me. I'd love your thoughts. Send me a message or email at coachal@definingdadbod.com. The second piece of housekeeping is a highlight of one of our awesome reviews. Thank you guys so much for helping us get 50 5-star raving reviews on the Defining Dad Bod podcast on iTunes. If you're listening and you're not using iTunes, you can subscribe through the free iTunes application, and it'd really help out the show if you scroll down to the bottom clicked ratings and reviews, and took 30 seconds to just tell people what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. These sorts of reviews bring us to the top of the iTunes charts, so when people search for things like how to lose weight, counting calories, what supplement should I take, how should I exercise during a pandemic, Defining Dad Bod will actually pop up as one of the search items. Here, journeyman.tn says, "The podcasts Alex creates are just so valuable to me. They're well-rounded, hitting on fitness, nutrition, and health maintenance in a simple, concise, and entertaining format. If you're looking for the real deal, check it out. You'll be a believer too." Thanks, Journeyman. You rock. And if you are from Tennessee, high five. I spent a lot of my years there, and it's a lovely place. Again, if you haven't written us a raving review, help the show out. It takes 30 seconds, and it means a lot to us around here. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the science and practice around supplementing probiotics. I love this supplement class because it is very misunderstood among our average population. In fact, for my first decade as a personal trainer and coach, I really didn't understand probiotics very well either. As far as I knew, if you had problems with your gut, you should try a probiotic here and there, and maybe it would do something good for you. Okay, my understanding was a little bit deeper than that, and we'll get to my coaching practice in a bit. But today we're going to start by talking about why a probiotic might actually work well for you, what the rationale is behind it. Then we'll talk about the actual research on probiotics and the challenges related to finding out what exactly they do for you, and whether or not anything can be said apart from our actual diet versus a probiotic supplement. And then I'll spend some time talking to you about my coaching practice around probiotics, particularly the things that we can do nutritionally for our gut to promote a great microbiome that's healthy, good, and will result in a positive body composition for us. And we'll talk about a specific probiotic supplement that, given our conversation today, will likely be helpful for you. We've got a lot to cover, so let's dive in. First, before we talk about probiotic supplements, we need to talk about the concept of a microbiome. Now, I've covered this specifically on the show with Dr. Bruce Cooper in episode 140. That's season 2 of Defining Dad Bod, titled Your Amazing Microbiome. And you're welcome to check that out to get a more comprehensive understanding of what the microbiome actually is and where it comes from. The short of it is, your body is a host to a bunch of different microorganisms, and those microorganisms can affect your health, your well-being, your body composition, and even your hormonal levels, either for good or for ill. If you've been following my show for a while, you might have heard me or one of my guests reference a study where researchers took lean rats and fat rats and changed their microbiome with a fecal transplant. That's just as gross as it sounds, by the way. A fecal transplant is where the microbiome of one animal is moved to another animal by taking the contents of their large intestine and inserting it into the contents of the other's large intestine. If that sounds like a messy procedure, it's because it actually is. But what the researchers found in this study was powerful and fascinating. By transferring the bacteria from lean rats to obese rats, the obese rats became lean without changing anything about how much food they were fed. And the opposite was true. Transferring the bacteria from obese rats to lean rats without changing the food they were fed made the lean rats obese. This study came out in the early 2000s, and I remember it blew my mind as a personal trainer who often worked with people who are interested in gaining lean muscle and losing fat mass. And since then, the study's been replicated a bunch of different ways, including the transfer of, quote, thin bacteria from lean humans to obese rats and finding similar results. Okay, Alex, I came here to learn about probiotics. Why are we talking about poop, rats, and fat mass? I've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is this is directly related to our conversation about why probiotics could have a positive and powerful effect on many different aspects of your health. Not just fat and muscle, but digestive function, energy levels, hormone levels, and even your ability to fight infections. The bad news is, this is not the last time we're going to talk about poop in this episode, and I'm sorry, but that's just the way of it when you start talking about microbiomes. If you want to hear more about the big picture with regard to microbiomes, check out episode 140. The link's in the show notes below. But the short of it is, your body is the host of many billions and billions of cells that aren't your own. And some of those cells are doing wonderful things to help you with your immune system, to help you break down your food well, to talk to your brain in a positive and powerful way, and even regulate things like your circadian rhythm. While other groups of those cells are causing what we call dysbiosis. they're living on and in your body is causing dysfunction that's not very helpful to you. And instead of a symbiotic relationship with your microbiome, you have a dysbiotic relationship with your microbiome. More on that in a bit when we talk about specific bacterial colonies. So the rationale behind supplementing with a probiotic is inherent in the name, probiotic, in favor of biosis. That is to say, there's a whole line of supplements out there that are basically bacterial colonies in capsules, powders, and drinks that are intended to flood your body with positive bacteria that can help to shift the environment of your body in a positive direction. To put it in a different way, allow me to liken your body to the battlefield in Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. On one side of the battlefield, you have the good guys, and on the other side of the battlefield, you have the bad guys. The bad guys are led by none other than Sauron, the evil one with dark hordes of orcs and goblins and giants who are trying to take over Middle-earth. And on the other side, you have the good guys, led by Aragorn, rightful king, armies of dwarves and elves and humans who are taking on the bad guys. In this analogy, your body's Middle-earth, good, happy, healthy microbiome is the good guys, bad, dysbiotic microbiome is the bad guys. And the idea of supplementing a probiotic is to add some reinforcements to the good guys of Middle-earth. Maybe some reinforcements might shift the battle in a positive direction, and instead of being inhabited by a bunch of trolls and goblins, your Middle-earth can live happily ever after as a place where hobbits and humans can live peacefully. Okay, maybe you're not a hardcore nerd, and so that was a bad analogy, and I'm sorry. But the core of it holds true. And the question today is, does taking a probiotic supplement reinforce the positive microbiome of your body and even help overcome the negative microbiome that may be causing symptoms like diarrhea, lack of energy, increased adiposity, or difficulty losing fat, and even sleep disturbances? That's a good question. Let's talk about the research. The short answer is yes. Probiotics can have a positive and powerful effect on a number of mechanisms in the body. However, the difficulty in research thus far has been twofold. One, we need large sample sizes in our research to be able to generalize the positive effects of probiotics on the population. What do I mean by that? Well, for instance, one study in 100 elderly individuals found that supplementing with a bacterial colony called Lactobacillus casei, which is found in a fermented dairy drink, actually increased the number of antibodies in the elderly population following their influenza vaccination. And this study was a randomized, placebo-controlled trial, and so the effect can be considered significant. Now, does that mean you, in an attempt to improve your immune system, should start drinking fermented dairy drinks? Well, this study can't really tell you to do that, because the study was done on an elderly population in relationship to their response to the flu vaccine, which means, yes, there is a positive benefit for the elderly population who is getting a flu vaccine to consume this probiotic drink. But no, we can't say that you doing the same thing, unless you're in the elderly population and getting a flu vaccine, would benefit from doing the same thing. And when you sift through the research for probiotics, you find many similar issues. Are you a woman who's currently breastfeeding? If yes, then there are studies that would recommend certain probiotics for you in benefiting you and your infant. Does that mean your not lactating husband should do the same thing? Well, we can't say from the research. Are you a colicky toddler who's wrestling with intermittent diarrhea and bouts of irritability perhaps related to digestive discomfort? If yes, then there are probiotics that might be helpful to you. If no, then it's hard to generalize that research to you. All that to say, when you look up a probiotic that maybe you should be taking, and that probiotic shows, quote, beneficial researched effects, it would be helpful to know what populations those researched effects have been found for. Today, I'm going to cover a few specific populations that would benefit from a particular probiotic, and I'm going to point you in the direction of some research that actually helps us to understand some of the mechanisms behind these positive benefits, and then you can make a decision for yourself if this might be helpful to you. The second problem we run into with research on probiotics is that there are literally millions of different bacteria that we could be studying that may have a positive or negative effect on the human microbiome. When somebody says, "Should I be taking probiotics, Alex?" my question is, which one? I mean, unless you have a degree in microbiology, it's very, very difficult to understand the difference between one probiotic and another. For instance, I've recommended a specific probiotic to clients in the past, and after a week I've said, "How's this going?" And they'll say, "Well, I didn't get the probiotic you asked for, but I did start eating yogurt." Unfortunately for them, if I recommended a supplement of Saccharomyces Boulardii, which is a particular bacteria that we'll talk about momentarily that could be helpful for the digestive tract on a number of counts, but they misunderstood that and thought, man, if I just get some more probiotics, like from yogurt, which in America, by the way, contains S. thermophilus and L. bulgariensis, then their introduction of yogurt instead of the probiotic that I recommended is not the least bit related to the actual symptoms we were trying to deal with. Personally, my experience with the research and with recommending particular probiotics to clients revolve around a specific bacterial species, and that species has special properties that, again, have been researched to have an effect on us, compared to the actual Food and Drug Administration's assertion that all yogurt should have the same 2 bacterial colonies in it in order to be called yogurt in the US. To lump all of the bacterial species that we understand exist in our fermented foods and in our non-fermented foods under the umbrella of probiotic does an injustice to the spirit of double-blind placebo-controlled trials. If you don't take anything else away from that spiel, before we get to the actual research of Saccharomyces Boulardii, you need to take away that all probiotics are not created equal, and to get the beneficial effect of a probiotic is very dependent on the species of probiotic you're taking and the number of active cultures that are in that supplement. So, I've been promising you some positive research. Let's dive into that. Listed in the show notes below is a link to a powerful meta-analysis entitled The Efficacy and Safety of the Probiotic Saccharomyces Boulardii for the Prevention and Therapy of Gastrointestinal Disorders. Forgive me, my Latin's a little rusty, but if you didn't gather it from the title, I intend to do a review of this particular article, which has over 200 scientific publication citations, to help you understand the only probiotic strain that I usually recommend for people. And then, after a review of the research, I'm going to talk about how I use this in my coaching practice, in addition to the many other nutritional changes that I recommend in order to promote a healthy microbiome. So this study was more of a review of the literature around Saccharomyces Boulardii, and it was published in 2012 in partnership between the Inflammatory Bowel Disease Center of UCLA and the Department of Medicine at UCLA. I'm going to dive into some specifics here, but I want you to understand that the short of it is this. If you are experiencing symptoms related to gastrointestinal disorders, such as parasitic infections, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, or the many different types of diarrhea, including acute, chronic, travelers, or even HIV-related diarrhea, then a supplement with active cultures of Saccharomyces Boulardii will yield powerful and beneficial effects for you. The only risks that seem associated with this supplement are a potential danger to the immunocompromised, specifically to those who have an indwelling catheter, in whom supplementing with this particular probiotic might increase incidence of fungemia or could induce an allergic reaction. Again, just a little bit louder for those in the back. If you have stomach issues, this probiotic could be very helpful to you, and the only reason that it's not worth trying is if you're immunocompromised or you have an indwelling catheter. Now, why this particular colony, and what are the effects? Well, first, remember I told you that all probiotics are not the same. There are different species of bacteria, and therefore those species have different properties. Now, not many people have spent a lot of time over a microscope, so let me make this pretty clear. Bacteria, just like other flora, act differently, eat different things, excrete different things, and have different properties from species to species. Confusing Saccharomyces Boulardii with Lactobacillus casei is kind of like calling a bird a cat. Birds don't eat the same things that cats do. Birds don't act the same way that cats do. And birds don't like the same environment that cats do. And while any microbiologist might find this a very strange analogy, I really need those of you who aren't microbiologists to understand the difference. In the article that I've cited, with many supporting citations, Saccharomyces Boulardii has been found to exhibit antimicrobial activity. That is to say, this particular bacteria seems to get rid of other microbes, other bacteria, and other viruses to be exact. This bacterial colony also seems to give antitoxic effects. That is, this bacterial colony seems to eliminate some of the toxins associated with the bad bacteria that might be infesting your gut right now. Also, strangely, Saccharomyces Boulardii seems to support other good bacteria in the body. In the research, it's called crosstalk to normal microbiota. And by supplementing with this particular bacterial colony, the research suggests that the presence of this bacterial colony can increase the numbers of other positive bacterial colonies as well. Why is this bacterial colony so special? Well, it's not really magic. It has 8 properties that seem to make it perfect for the job of improving the human microbiome. First, it actually survives its passage to your target organ, which is your colon. That is to say, after you take the supplement, it survives passage through your hydrochloric acid in your stomach, through all the enzymes in your small intestine, to actually make it to your large intestine, where the majority of negative symptoms related to your microbiome exist. Now, it's important to note here that if you take a probiotic supplement that has 25 billion active cultures of Saccharomyces Boulardii, the actual amount of this bacterial colony that enters your large intestine will be about 1,000 times lower than what you took. And so while this particular bacterial colony does survive the process of digestion, not all of it does. And so the amount of cultures in your actual supplement matter. The second property of this particular bacteria that make it special and unique is that it survives well at our body temperature. There are actually just a few yeast bacteria that do well at human body temperature, and therefore, again, not all probiotic supplements are created equal here. The third property is related to the first, in that it actually survives bile and gastric acid. So not only does it get to your large intestine, but this particular bacterial colony is not going to be further broken down by your digestive system. The fourth property that makes this unique is that it's naturally resistant to antibiotics. And I'll talk about my coaching practice in a bit, but one of the reasons that I recommend a probiotic is if you are currently or have recently taken an antibiotic. And since this bacterial colony survives antibiotics pretty well, it's a great way to bolster your microbiome, despite fighting a negative infection elsewhere. The fifth property is that this bacterial strain is resistant to proteolysis, which is the process of breaking down proteins in your small intestine. The sixth property is that this bacterial colony also seems to work well in the competitive niche of your current microbiome. In other words, this bacterial colony is not going to take over your good bacteria in its pursuit of starving and killing off the bad bacteria. The seventh interesting property is that this bacterial colony proliferates more in people who have a disturbed intestinal microbiota, meaning that if you are currently experiencing dysbiosis in your microbiome, then Saccharomyces Boulardii is actually going to grow faster in your intestinal tract. Whereas if you take this supplement and your gut flora is really not disturbed, it's really not going to have any effect, either positive or negative. And the last property that I find most interesting and most beneficial is that when taken orally, Saccharomyces Boulardii reaches its peak within 3 days of supplementation, and within 5 days of discontinuing its supplementation, it's completely cleared. That means this bacterial colony comes in, does a good job of getting rid of microbes, improving inflammatory markers, ridding the intestinal tract of toxins, and doing all that without harming your good microbiome, and then leaves without a trace. Coming back to my nerdy analogy of Middle Earth, Saccharomyces Boulardii is not just reinforcements for the good guys, it's the giant golden eagles that swoop into the battlefield, get rid of the bad stuff, and then leave, with the good guys in a much better spot than they were before. Shout out to my little brother, who's watched Lord of the Rings more times than I can count, and has even made me listen to the soundtrack while hiking. Now I've outlined the research properties of this particular bacterial colony, and I've mentioned a few things that can be really helpful with. Again, if you want to review this literature, the link is in the show notes below. But I think the most important thing I can hone in on here is this. If you have experienced gastrointestinal disorders, that is diarrhea related to traveling and eating foreign foods, an acute issue related to inflammation, allergies, or as a secondary effect of another infection, or you just have chronic loose stools, like somebody who wrestles with Ehlers-Danlos, for instance, then supplementation with Saccharomyces Boulardii has been found to be beneficial for that population. Similarly, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and irritable bowel syndrome have all been shown through double-blind placebo-controlled trials to benefit from supplementation with Saccharomyces Boulardii. Lastly, parasitic infections, like those related to H. pylori or Giardia, like a toddler might contract by drinking mud puddles in the backyard. #true story. #I don't want to talk about it. Those parasitic infections have been found through clinical double-blind placebo-controlled trials to benefit positively in supplementing Saccharomyces Boulardii. And since this particular bacterial colony has been found to only present potential risks to those who are currently immunocompromised and or have an indwelling catheter, my advice to clients is try it. It's not a particularly expensive supplement, it doesn't last very long, and if it's going to have beneficial and positive effects, you'll know within the week. So I can hear you asking, Alex, we've talked a lot about one specific bacterial colony, but you mentioned that there are literally thousands, if not millions of them. Are there any other probiotics that I should be considering that have beneficial effects on, muscle growth or fat loss? I hear you, and I wish I could tell you yes. But like I said in the very beginning of this show, one of the things that we've had a very challenging time of in the past 2 decades of research is isolating bacterial colonies and their effects on the general population. And while a quick search of probiotics on examine.com will yield 25 or so cited research articles on the potential positive benefits of different bacterial colonies on different demographics, to my knowledge, none of them have been isolated and studied nearly as much as Saccharomyces Boulardii has. And so, as I promised at the very beginning of this supplement series, while I don't purport to know everything, I am committed to bringing you what we do know from a research perspective, and I promise to keep my ear to the ground as the scientific community gets better and better at isolating different bacterial colonies because of our ability to sift through DNA now, and because of promising and continued funding of this area of research. I've said several times on this show, and I'll keep saying it, we have no idea of the power of our microbiome to affect our body, to affect our DNA, to affect our hormonal systems, and I personally am excited to learn more about how we might be able to positively benefit from understanding these bacterial colonies better, feeding them well, and supporting them in and on our body any way we can. Which brings me then to the final part of this show, which is how I use this in my coaching practice. You know, on the topic of me still learning, I started this show by telling you that the first decade of my personal training career, I didn't know jack about probiotics either. In fact, the hormone pyramid that I used to use as the foundation for my coaching practice had probiotic supplementation as a step in the thyroid phase of my training program. Now, while there is good science to suggest that a healthy microbiome in the gut is responsible for about 20% of our thyroid function, that is, transferring our T4 to T3, we still haven't found if there's a specific probiotic bacterial colony that has a better effect on the thyroid than others. So my coaching practice has evolved over the past few years, partially because improved research over the past few years, partially because I work to improve my coaching model every year as well, and partially because I experienced an ulcerative colitis episode that taught me more about the gut than I ever wanted to know. So in my clientele, I work to do two things. One, if I believe they would benefit from supplementing with Saccharomyces Boulardii because of the digestive complaints that they're bringing up in our sessions, then I recommend a very specific one. This is the one I've taken personally, this is the one with enough active cultures to matter, and that link's in the show notes below. Full disclosure, I've provided my Amazon affiliate link so that the dollar we make from you ordering on Amazon can go back into the show. But the other thing my clients need to know when we start talking about supplementing with a probiotic is that adding reinforcements for the good guys in a crummy environment is not going to shift the battle in a great direction. That is to say, if you're eating in a way that isn't supporting a healthy microbiome, then it doesn't matter what probiotic supplement we take, you're always going to shift back to a crummy microbiome and your symptoms are going to come back regularly. Like all supplements, Saccharomyces Boulardii is not a magic pill. It supports good, healthy practices that lead to better results. So there are many changes I could recommend from a nutritional standpoint to promote a good, healthy microbiome. I'm going to list 5 here, and if you have further questions about them, go to definingdadbod.com/innercircle and drop your question there so I can cover it in our live Q&A in our online community. You've already been through a lot in this episode, so I don't want to belabor these too much, but I want you to be able to walk away with something that you can actionably use today to support your gut whether or not you're going to be supplementing a probiotic. First and most glaring, you have to reduce, if not eliminate, ultra-processed fats and carbs from your diet. I told you we don't know much about the microbiome, but one of the things we do know is that a healthy, happy human microbiome exists on the unprocessed fats and carbohydrates of the diet that we evolved over millions of years to eat. And I'm sorry, but your Twinkie, your highly processed protein bar, and your animal crackers are not on the list of things that a healthy microbiome wants to be eating. You've got to swap your ultra-processed fats and carbohydrates for the good stuff. If you want more specifics on that, the links to the TRUFIT series, episodes on fats and carbohydrates, are in the show notes below. We do a deep dive of different sources of fats and carbohydrates and what they do for you, and you're welcome to check that out. Change number 2 is ensuring you get enough fiber in your diet. Now, fiber is tricky because fiber is a supplement all by itself that you could find if you Google. However, not all fiber sources are created equal. I know, I'm sorry it's so complicated. In general, sources like vegetables and berries are beneficial for everybody. And if you're getting enough vegetables and berries in your day, you're not going to have too hard of a time providing your microbiome with the fiber that it needs to do a great job. I've largely found that most fiber supplements are a waste of money and digestive discomfort. I'm looking at you, Fiber One bars with your chicory root, but that might be a conversation for another day. Either way, increase the amount of foods in your day that have good soluble and insoluble fiber, and if you need more on that, again, check out the carbohydrate episode in the TRUFIT series, the link to which is in the show notes below. The third thing you can do is actually increase the amount of probiotic foods in your diet. Wait, probiotic foods? Yeah, you heard me right. There are foods that have different positive bacterial colonies in them that have been shown to be beneficial for people. At the very beginning of this episode, I mentioned research around a fermented dairy product that had Lactobacillus casei in it. And there are a number of foods that have beneficial bacterial colonies built right into the food itself. Note that you're looking for live, active cultures in these foodstuffs, since today, with our scientific knowledge, we're able to create these foods, but we're also able to eliminate those beneficial probiotics through processing. So you gotta read the label. From the dairy world, I recommend kefir and yogurt regularly. Again, look for the active bacterial culture count. 2. From the cabbage world, we've got kimchi and sauerkraut, both of which I know are an acquired taste, but they can be positive and beneficial for your gut. From the soy world, we've got miso, tempeh, and natto, and while they could be difficult to find, it may be contraindicated for males wrestling with testosterone issues. I find these to be particularly powerful for my female clients. And last but not least, if you're looking for an interesting drink option, you can incorporate some kombucha. Be careful though. Some companies have a ridiculous amount of sugar in their kombucha drink, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because adding healthy bacteria to your happy gut while also adding a large amount of sugar, which could feed bacteria you don't really want around, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You tend to get what you pay for. The last thing I'll add, from a nutritional changes perspective, is I coach my clients to increase the amount of plant polyphenols in their diet that have been researched to find beneficial effects on the gut. My 3 favorites are aloe juice, ginger, and turmeric. Ginger and turmeric can be found in your produce aisle and can be consumed as a tea or as a seasoning on foods, unless you're just a beast and you can eat them outright. #goals. And aloe juice can be consumed just like water. In a lot of grocery stores you can find it in the pharmaceutical area, and personally, I drink about 6 ounces a day. Each of these plant polyphenols have been shown to have positive benefits on your microbiome and could potentially reduce inflammatory markers and heal damage to your large intestine. There are a number of other potential benefits, but those might be worth exploring at a later date in a show all of their own. But just know, if you are working with me as a coach and you are experiencing significant digestive issues, I'd be recommending these in addition to your probiotic supplement. Because again, if we're going to be helping you with a probiotic supplement, we also need to create the environment to allow those positive benefits to stick and to shift the environment of your body toward promoting the good army winning. And so there you have it, Coach Al's breakdown on probiotic supplements. Your body is an environment to an amazing microbiome that can benefit you or hurt you in the long run. And while research is scattered about the specific benefits of different bacterial colonies on the general population, one bacterial colony stands out above the rest right now, and that is Saccharomyces Boulardii. If you're wrestling with digestive issues, you can make some nutritional changes to support a great environment in your gut, and you can supplement with this bacterial colony to reinforce the good guys and shift things in your favor. I hope this discussion has been helpful and practical to you, and that you'll share it with somebody who you know needs to hear it. If you have questions about a supplement that you'd like us to review here on Defining Dad Bod, I'd be happy to take your questions. Go to definingdadbod.com/supps, SUPPS, and fill out the form there, and we'll work it into our show lineup. That's definingdadbod.com/supps, SUPPS. And if you're not already a part of it, join our online community so you can ask questions like this and have them answered anytime you want at definingdadbod.com/innercircle. The group's free to join. We have an amazing crew there who are working to become 1% better every single day. We run challenges, we do live Q&As, and we share our struggles and triumphs with the group for high fives and words of encouragement. We'd love to have you. That's definingdadbod.com/innercircle. This has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Thanks so much for listening. And until next time, guys, kick butt, take names.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased, thanks to the support of listeners just like you. If this episode's been helpful to you, please share it with somebody in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. And finally, if you want more Defining Dad Bod, consider joining our online community. We send a lot of free perks and resources your way, and I, Coach Alex, go live every month to talk through our listeners' health and fitness questions to make the practical science of this show applicable to everyday life. Everyone's welcome, and we'd love to have you. For more information about joining the Inner Circle or becoming a supporter of the Defining Dad Bod podcast, go to definingdadbod.com/innercircle. That's definingdadbod.com/innercircle.